Islam is marked by the one God. If there's anything that is true and that is asserted by Islam without qualification, it's precisely the unity of the divine and consequently of all in the divine. And we can think of this also more dramatically, you might say more dynamically, because the sense of the origin of Islam and its great attention to unity was precisely in opposition to a situation of polytheism. It was the great message of the prophet that God is one, that this is truth, the truth of God, that anything less than that is not a true God at all. Islamic thought and the making of our global future, challenges and contributions. It's a complex juncture. It's a difficult world, but the way in which we proceed in these circumstances, I think, will be decisive for the future of humanity during this 21st century. So it is a question of amazing importance. And so I'd like to begin then with the importance of the issue, then move to the contribution of Islamic thought in this regard, then to the challenges to this contribution, and finally to ways of resolution of those challenges. Beginning then with the importance of the issue. The global presence is, I think, something which speaks for itself. Sometimes these things speak negatively. When we have a Chernobyl, for instance, we begin to find that what is done in one corner of the world has implications for many other parts of the world. It's something that cannot be ignored. So this experience, along with the experience of global warming, which now is affecting the two poles as well as everything in between, this is a manifestation of the global unity that we live in. Unfortunately, in the economic order, the same is true. How a subunit of one company on Wall Street could proceed to bankrupt the whole planet. This is something new. This is something we can't ignore. Or, of course, with communications. Now, whatever happens in the world is present to everybody immediately. We live then in a global world. What is the importance of this fact? I remember back in 1969 being at a philosophy conference in Hawaii. And that was the time that man landed on the moon. And with the group of philosophers, East and West, at the East and West Center, they began to talk about what this would mean for humanity. Not just the technical achievement of getting there, but especially being able to look back and to see the world and to see it as a globe, to see it as a whole. What would this mean then? The sense of meaning that we have for anything is always in terms of a whole. what is the whole that we're speaking about? If you look at a university, you have all these different departments. Each one has its own sense of the whole. Chemistry is one. Biology is another. Politics is another. Each one has a sense of the whole, and everything that is said in there has its meaning in those terms. And everything within that whole is understood in terms of the whole itself. Whether it's ourself, whether it's our social relations, whether it's the way in which we act, it depends on how we understand that whole in which we stand as a particular part. Jean Piaget is the one who works on child development, and his formula, you might say, for development, child development, was that the progress and the development of the child is in terms of the child's ability to integrate diversity that is found within its experience, to integrate that into the whole. So what we're thinking about then is not just a whole as a given, but a whole as the context for human development. And if we put those two together, that the whole determines the understanding of the part, and the engagement with the parts is an ongoing and developmental factor, then we might say that if this juncture at which we stand, this encounter with the global whole, this ability and imperative to think in terms of the whole, if this is where we are, then humanity now is taking a huge step ahead. But a huge step ahead is a step into new territory. It's a step that we have not taken before. And consequently, like a child who is encountering some new diversity in their life and is terrified by it or confused by it and needs the help of an older person, we are at that point. The step into a global world is a challenging step. We don't know how to handle that, and we must find how to do that. We are then at a very dangerous, a very promising stage in the history of humanity. We alone are the ones who have been and are able to think of the global whole. We alone are the ones who encounter all the peoples of the world all the time and immediately. Then we are facing the huge challenge of the unity of the globe in which we now live. This is our experience. This is our challenge. What we do with it will be determinative as we move towards the future. Islam has a very special role to play. Islam is marked by one, the one God. If there's anything that is true and that is asserted by Islam without qualification, it's precisely the unity of the divine and consequently of all in the divine. The sense of the origin of Islam and its great attention to unity was precisely in opposition to a situation of polytheism. It was the great message of the prophet that God is one, that this is truth, the truth of God, that anything less than that is not a true God at all. So you might say the whole dynamism of Islam as we look back to its origin is precisely that contrary movement against a polytheism to a unity in terms of which then all must be understood.